All right. Well, we're sitting around having a little bit of discussion today about all things Australian veterans. There's been a lot going on in the last couple of weeks, hasn't there, Mark?
Oh, mate, it's been a huge week. Well, it's not even a huge week; it's a huge month, and I think a good working title for our for this little update is the point of no return. I think there's probably three good reasons that I can think of. Number one is that AVN has really launched, and we can't stop it at the moment. We're getting phone calls and ideas from stories and people offering to be interviewed almost every day. Getting phone calls from presidents of RSLs and anybody who's been involved in any ex-service organisation, really keen to talk to us and get their message across, which is really great because that's what we want to be here for. I think the second thing is that we've been covering quite closely the call for a Royal Commission into veteran suicides, and we gave Darren Chester a bit of a razz through Leo Angelo's Fisher's article and a bit of follow-up on social media. And we know that there is a lot more work going on in the background in other sectors and other areas to push for that Royal Commission, and we're getting behind that at the moment as well. And I think that's another area where there's a point of no return situation going on there. So I think it's probably a topic that we can talk about. And the third one is just, we've been covering RSL Victoria. We're here in Victoria, so we've got a lot of connections in the area. And it's been really interesting, the sort of things that have been going on around that. We had a chance to speak to Jamie Twydale earlier last week. I've spoken to both and interviewed both the presidential, or two of the presidential candidates. David Jamieson and Glenn Ferrarotto, and they gave some, pretty good insights to who they are and what they're on about. We have had an offer on the table for well over a month now, and I did have I was holding out a hope that Rob Webster would join us for a conversation, so we get to hear his voice and understand a little bit about where he's coming from, and we could complete the picture. That hasn't come to fruition, and I think I'm pretty much given up on that one. So
it's a shame that we didn't get to hear from Rob because, we're an independent news source and we like to provide a balanced view of what's happening out there. I feel that's a big missed opportunity for him to get his opinions and his strategy out there. How do you feel about that?
Oh, I feel you're absolutely right, Trent. We're happy to. Obviously, we're happy to. We'll develop a view as well, and we'll make it clear what we think, and we'll probably deliver a little bit of that today. But yeah, it's a real missed opportunity. I'm glad Jamie Twydale's been able to come on board and have a talk to us. That's been, I think, of great value. I think there's been some doubts in the veteran community about his leadership of the RSL, Jamie's, as a CEO. But I think more and more I look at, the engagement with him over the last, month or so, and you can tell that I think he's trying and doing his best. He may not have all the skills needed for the job, given his background, but, who has? It's an extraordinarily difficult job, Yes.
Well, there's a lot of stakeholders in that job, and the CEO gets pulled in a lot of directions, but they've also got a lot of problems to fix. And we open this with, are they beyond the point of no return?
It also comes down to this, mate. The CEO is still the instrument of the board. That's my basic little catch cry at the moment. They don't get to decide everything, and they've actually got to do things under instructions. And there's been a lot of issues in the background lately about. I know that there's potentially some more tribunals coming through for members who have spoken out and have been sort of promoting some parodies, or I don't know what they've been doing. It's sort of the typical sort of thing, and someone's a bit thin-skinned and has decided they want to do something about it. But that's not necessarily a decision that the CEO would make. They probably, I suspect he's probably just doing that under instructions, but I don't know for sure, and I'm not going to ask him to confirm that. He wouldn't be able to. But you certainly start to get to see the nature of the current board and the way they operate there. You consider the amount of resignations they've had in the last few months. And I mean, the number of phone calls and off the record conversations that I've had a president of an RSL who's not even part of any of this, but a Victorian RSL president on the phone for about an hour yesterday, just explaining how they just don't want to communicate with Anzac House anymore. So it shows that the situation's quite serious. And, when we talk about the point of no return, I just don't know how it can go back to, to that current leadership, but they're not cutting it, unfortunately.
I tend to agree. I mean, you can't build on a foundation that's not solid, and I just can't see from all the comments we've received that there's a solid foundation that they can move forward on. In there, I mean, we've heard that there's a lot of dissent amongst the ranks in regards to their focus, which they haven't been very forthcoming in sharing. What do you think about that? I mean, I think their communication has been seriously lacking.
It's a major problem, right? So let's talk about we've obviously offered interviews and openness. I think that's I'd like to think that served Jamie Tydale well for coming on board. Has taken the wind out of the sails of some of his critics, because I actually get to see what he's thinking and what he's suggesting, and I think he's got some reasonings around some things he can do, and there's obviously things that he has no decision-making power at all over. The style of the communication is one of the things is the state executive communique, right? Communique, mate. Mate, we're not in 1980. This is 2020. We don't do communiques anymore. We do this kind of thing. We've got to be more open. We've actually got to potentially, take a risk and be out there and have the conversation. And I think that's part of the issue. The other thing is that those who are good at the communication or who are savvy at sending their messages out there are getting a lot of coverage. But I'm also concerned that means that some people, there could be a bit of a silent majority out there who aren't being heard and might have some differing views. And so that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, particularly when the elections come around. But one thing that we know from the veteran community is there's no point trying to hide and massage the message and all that kind of stuff. Be clear about what it is you're trying to achieve, because if you're not, then people will just make a lot of assumptions about the situation, and it's pretty easy to cast doubt and blame on people and look for, I guess, bad motives when maybe there aren't any. But, so there's that issue. But communication, big problem.
That clear, concise and timely communication is so important. And especially in an area like we both know, Mark, because we've worked in it a lot, that there's so much noise in the veterans community and messages, unfortunately, can get misconstrued quite often if they're not clear, concise and timely.
Yeah.
But I see that failing over and over again from many, many important people and entities that work within that space.
Yeah, mate. And look, it's brutal, right? The veteran community will give you, and the other thing is, it's not a cohesive as people might think. I mean, there are some, and I think this problem we've got at the moment in Victoria is just causing some very deep divisions, and that's a major problem, right? So, so that's across the board, and it's not just dealing with what's going on in RSL Victoria. I mean, I think that's a topic we can park now, and we've had our say about that. But I think people are very aware of that situation. I think the only thing that I want to say further about that is just what it means when it comes to when the sub branches do their elections and work out who they're going to vote for. And from my perspective, I can see that they've got no choice but to vote for some kind of change. The question is, at the end of the day, if they get the change and vote for change, then who's going to have the skills out of the choices that are there to actually build some unity and to deal with the complexity of RSL? Because you just can't go in and smash all the things you don't like. You've actually got to do things very, very carefully, and you've got to bring a lot of other people on who invested a lot into their sub branches and their communities, and that's going to be really important, and it's going to be difficult because there's a lot of distractions in doing that job. And I don't think you can sit back and be silent and send out the odd communique or that kind of thing. It's just not enough, and it's going to take some real leadership. And I think whoever gets in there is probably going to upset people anyway, no matter who it is. It's going to be hard. Yeah.
I think they you can't please everyone all the time, and there's so many different factions going on in the RSL that there's no way that everyone's going to be.
It's worse than that, Trent, because too many things have been left to drift along. You know, I mean, this is a problem that's been in the making for you know, many years. It's not just the problem that's been in the making of this current crowd and all that kind of thing. It's been in the making for a long time. It's drifted along, and in a way, I feel a little bit sorry for the folk who are, you know, who might maybe lose their sort of elected positions in spectacular form, because it's you know, it's a hard thing, you know, for that to happen, and you know, it'd be a real shame that's the end of a very long you know, era of service that people might have put into the organisation. So there's that as well. But it must change, and it needs to change, and it's been driven regardless. So, you know, the energy's there, and it's coming from all quarters at the moment that I can see. So that's very, very important. One thing I wouldn't mind talking about a little bit is about the Leo's recent article on about the Q&A program, where one of our correspondents, Julianne Finney, was turned out to be on the program, and she asked Darren Chester what the government was afraid of, why they weren't, you know, backing a Royal Commission, and she's raised, and others have raised, some very, very serious concerns about that commissioner position. And now there's an interim commissioner who's an ex, well, not even an ex, is an Army Reserve brigadier working within the Attorney General's department. It's you know, and who's this person going to be investigating? And you know, I just don't see how that's going to work and satisfy the families at all. It certainly doesn't satisfy me from an intellectual point of view. And Darren Chester failed to answer the question in a reasonable way. I mean, they haven't articulated well enough, apart from a bit of a marketing thing, that, you know, it's better than a commissioner because it's ongoing and all this sort of thing. You know, there's a lot of things that are missing out of this, and those pieces. I don't think anyone's going to rest until there is a Royal Commission and those needs are satisfied.
I agree, and I mean, it's something that you just can't keep talking about. There needs to be discernible action around this, because until there is, it's just going to keep bubbling away, and it's going to get a hotter and hotter topic. I mean, it's already a super hot topic.
And look, you know, the only concern that I can think of that I think is possibly a legitimate concern is that, it puts the families at risk, and they may not get the outcomes that they want, and those sorts of things. You know, there's some constraints in the way a Royal Commission has to be run as a sort of a public inquiry, etc., etc. And I think, okay, well, that's fair enough, but, you know, from an ethical standpoint, that should be a decision that the families themselves should make about whether they want to participate in it or not. And it seems to me overwhelmingly that they not even want to participate in it, they're calling for it. And I think, you know, just out of respect for them, at the very least, you know, you think you would want to do something about that. We can throw a Royal Commission for just about any odd thing these days, and for something so serious and so fundamental to the well-being of the ongoing well-being of our defence members and ADF members and their families. I can't see why you wouldn't want to know what's going on and you know, allow a commission, you know, a Royal Commission to do its work.
I agree. It seems I'm not sure why they keep holding back on it. This is something that needs to happen.
Yeah, and what's worse, I mean, this is just a bit of I guess a personal thing of mine, but I just find Darren Chester's response, I found it quite upsetting, and I think quite a number of other people do. And it's great to be all positive about the ADF and promoting all the good things that they do, and the thank you for your service and all that sort of stuff. But I think veterans are starting to get a bit sick of that, and I want to see a little bit more meat on the bone about what's being done, you know, to improve things, and not just the feel good, you know, happy little stories and snippets here and there, you know. We can do more than that.
Yeah, there's a point where there's only so much fuzzy feel good news that you can push out there before people start to wonder what's actually happening.
Yeah, and I think it just sort of, unfortunately, it sort of goes into the narrative that there's this sort of, marketing sort of hype behind the current government, and so it sort of looks like positive spin and marketing. It may not be. It might be quite genuine, but it's not resonating well, I don't think, with many. I think some people sort of think it's okay, and but I don't think veterans sort of fall, pretty cynical bunch, and that kind of thing starts to grate a little bit. So I think the Royal Commission is something there, and I'm aware from some conversations I've had over the last, the last week, that there's a lot more happening in this area, and I suspect there's going to be a lot more publicity around it. So that'll be one to watch out for, and we'll be covering a little bit of that as we go through the next week or two.
So can you let us know any of the interviews you've got coming up in the next week or so at this point?
I've got a good one, but I'm not going to reveal that until it's done, because I don't want to jinx it. But I've got a commitment for an interview later this week, actually, which I think will be a very good interview, and really looking forward to getting that one in the can and on our site. So that'll be good. So so there's that, and then I guess the pace of things at AVN has just been crazy. I mean, I don't know how many interviews I've done this week. I think in the last, I don't even know what day of the week it is now. Living in Melbourne, they all merge into one. But we're sort of doing one every couple of days at the moment. It's just sort of a really good one with Kevin Humphreys, which was released yesterday, about core infinitus, also known as core infinitus, which is a great initiative, and I do encourage people to have a look at that. It also relates to the issues of supporting families who are grieving as a result of veteran suicide, and awareness around that, and what people ought to be doing or could do to try and do whatever we can do to prevent those situations and those tragedies. So there was that one was very good. As I said, Glenn Ferrato was on, and I think he spoke a good hour, and he's outlined a few things. We talked a lot about veteran employment, a little bit about what's going on in the RSL leadership, etc. And before that, I think it was Jamie Twido, wasn't it? So and I think we got a pretty good sense. I felt we got a pretty good sense from him about the ideas of what's happening reform-wise, what's being planned and hoped for. Talked a little bit about strategy. I must admit, I'm still not convinced about strategy and roadmaps and all the rest of it. I think there's a fair bit more work to be done there, and probably going to need a rethink anyway, as Jamie acknowledged. Once the new board is confirmed, they really need to have a careful look at that. So yeah, it's been a busy time, mate, and I know you've had an interview that I'm hoping will be up very soon.
Yeah, I spoke to the guys at Dogs for Life, who are doing some very innovative work with welfare dogs and the veterans community, and it was very enlightening, very different to what I was expecting. So I'd expect that will be posted within the next 24 hours. It was quite interesting. This is a very different way of looking at welfare dogs.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. So look, I mean, I guess I just want to take just to sort of close out our update. So rather than sort of sending out a newsletter or something and saying, well, here's all the dot points, and I think this chat's probably a little bit more, hopefully a little bit more engaging. We'll see what the response is like, but it's an opportunity also to say informally that we're not here just to focus on 2 or 3 issues, and we're going to fire some stories, and obviously there's a couple of themes here. We've being located in Victoria, so that what's going on in Victoria RSL is interesting and as important to us personally as well. But we're also interested in what's going on elsewhere, and we've spoken to the CEO of Western Australia, and we've got really good insights about what their programs are, and so we're hoping to build that out, a lot more, and get a little bit more of national coverage. So if anybody's out there and they want to talk to us about what they're doing in their, outside of, especially if you're outside of Victoria, we'd love to hear from you. But we're also very interested in regional initiatives as well, because I think they're the heart of, the sort of things that need to be, where the support needs to go. And you'll probably notice in a lot of my interviews, I always ask people, well, you've got this fantastic initiative and it's all being set up in the CBD. So how does that help people in regions? Because I think they're the ones who are often forgotten. And, you know, when we're dealing with, you know, we're in 2020 now, you know, so the year of, you know, the NBN or internet or whatever you want to call it, and we can do a lot more for people, and we don't have to be constrained around bricks and mortar and monuments and all this sort of stuff. And it's time to shift the attitude, I think.
And that delivery to vets in regional Australia is so important, because we know from the work we did with Shout Out that there's so many vets that live outside metropolitan areas in Australia. And if COVID's taught us one thing, it's taught us how to use Zoom. So getting that message out and engaging with veterans in those areas is now easier than it was prior.
Because and look, I'll go back to an old one. You know, one of my old concerns is that we think we know what's going on because we're connected, or we think we're connected. But there's so many people out there we just don't know of, and we don't know where they are. We don't know what they're going through. There is a tendency to focus in on cohorts, and one of those cohorts at the moment, we're talking about younger veterans in transition. And you know, this happened when I was speaking with Glenn. Actually, we're talking about all these transition issues about the younger guys, you know, leaving, you know, the ADF. Well, don't forget, there's a lot of reservists who have to transition. They actually transition many times. It's actually, I think, it's much more difficult for them sometimes, especially if they're going away and have disrupt their civilian employment with an overseas trip. It's a lot more difficult, as we've found out from our other research, that it's a lot more difficult than they've ever anticipated, and actually has lasting impacts on their careers and sometimes on their life, on, you know, their lifestyles and everything else. So there's that, and then there's all these forgotten groups of, you know, cohorts from back in the 80s, 70s, you know, that sort of all that middle era, 90s. I think they're easily overlooked, and we don't know whether they're actually presenting with any, or if they have any, you know, support needs or problems or anything like that. I suspect there probably are some things that need to be understood and looked into, but we're not finding out, and obviously DVA has got a lot of work to do to build itself up. Problem is, it's run by public servants, so, you know, we'll be in for a long wait.
Yeah. All right, well, it's been good to have a chat, and it's definitely been a big month, and I'm going to say probably a bigger month coming. So yeah. I think we'll continue to do these updates and drop them in between all the stories and videos that are pushing out on Australian Veterans News.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes, mate. All right, thanks, Trent.